Klaus Hoffmann's hands trembled as he loosened his Italian silk tie, the fabric suddenly feeling like a noose around his neck. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower in downtown San Francisco had become a cage, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering no escape from the storm brewing outside, both literally and figuratively. Herr Hoffmann. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, barely audible over the chanting that had grown louder in the past hour. The protesters. There are now over 3,000 of them. Klaus pressed his palms against the cool glass, watching the sea of signs and banners below. Hoffmann Tech equals slave labor. German greed kills workers. Blood money. The words blurred together as his vision started to tunnel. He had built Hoffmann Tech from a small software startup in Munich into one of Europe's largest technology conglomerates. 30 years of 18-hour days, of missing birthdays and holidays, of prioritizing profit margins over everything else. And now at 55, it was all crumbling because of a leaked internal memo that detailed the working conditions at their manufacturing plants in Southeast Asia. The memo hadn't been wrong. Klaus had known about the 16-hour shifts, the locked dormitories, the wages that barely covered rent in cramped quarters shared by 8 workers. He had told himself it was necessary for competition, that improving conditions would make their products too expensive, that other companies did the same thing. But seeing a 19-year-old Vietnamese worker's suicide note translated into German, reading her words about how she would never see her family again because she couldn't afford the bus ticket home, that had broken something inside him that even his legendary German pragmatism couldn't repair. "Sir, the board is requesting your immediate resignation," his assistant continued, "and there are reporters in the lobby. They're asking about the Jakarta incident." The Jakarta incident. Klaus closed his eyes, remembering the email he'd received 3 months ago about a fire at one of their contractor facilities. 47 workers trapped because of blocked emergency exits. The contractor had been the cheapest bidder. "Tell the board they can have their resignation," Klaus said quietly. "But not today. Today, I need—" He couldn't finish the sentence. What did he need? Forgiveness, redemption, or just somewhere to hide from the weight of what he'd built his fortune on? The chanting outside grew louder, and Klaus felt his chest tighten. His heart was racing, his breathing shallow. The walls seemed to be closing in. He had to get out. Without another word to his assistant, Klaus grabbed his overcoat and headed for the private elevator. But as the doors opened on the ground floor, he saw the mob of reporters waiting in the lobby. Camera flashes exploded like lightning, and voices assaulted him from all directions. "Mr. Hoffmann, do you plan to compensate the families? How long have you known about the working conditions? Is it true you personally approved the cost-cutting measures?" Klaus pushed through them, his security team forming a barrier. But the questions followed him onto the street. The protesters had surrounded the building, their chants deafening. A young woman thrust a photograph in his face, a smiling Asian girl who couldn't have been older than 20. "This was Lin Nguyen," she screamed. "She died making your products. How do you sleep at night?" Klaus stumbled, his expensive leather shoes slipping on the wet pavement. Rain had started to fall, turning the October evening into a gray blur. He needed to get to his car, but the crowd was too thick, too angry. Someone threw something that splattered against his coat. An egg, he realized. His chest felt like it was in a vice. Each breath was a struggle. The world was spinning, and Klaus realized with growing panic that he was having some kind of attack. Heart attack? Panic attack? He couldn't tell the difference. He broke away from his security team and ran, pushing through the crowd, ignoring their shouts and camera flashes. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs gave out, until he found himself standing in front of a small diner, with condensation-fogged windows and a neon sign that flickered, "Rosita's Kitchen, Comida Casera." Klaus looked back. He had run nearly 8 blocks, and somehow, miraculously, he was alone. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through his $1,000 coat. He stood there for a moment, shivering, unsure of what to do next. The warm glow from the diner's windows was inviting. Through the glass, he could see a few customers eating quietly. A middle-aged Latina woman refilling coffee cups, the kind of ordinary scene he hadn't witnessed in years. When was the last time he had been in a place like this? When was the last time he had been anywhere without an entourage, a schedule, a purpose? Klaus pushed open the door, and a small bell chimed his arrival. The warm air hit his face, carrying scents of coffee and grilled onions and something that reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen in Bavaria. A few customers glanced up at him, a soaked man in an expensive suit, but their interest was brief and polite. "Puedo ayudarle?" asked the woman he'd seen through the window. She was perhaps in her 40s, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her name tag read Rosa. I. Klaus realized he didn't know what he wanted. "Coffee, please. Just coffee." Rosa studied his face with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen plenty of people in crisis walk through her door. "Claro. You sit wherever you like, mijo." Klaus chose a corner booth, as far from the other customers as possible. His hands were still shaking as he pulled out his phone. 37 missed calls, 84 unread messages. The top news story on every major website featured his name. He turned the phone face down on the table and stared out the rain-streaked window. What was he supposed to do now? How did someone like him, someone who had built their entire identity around success and control, handle complete and utter failure? Rosa appeared at his table, with a steaming mug of coffee and a small plate, with what looked like homemade cookies. "On the house," she said gently. "You look like you could use some kindness tonight." Klaus looked up at her, this stranger offering him comfort when the rest of the world wanted to destroy him. "Danke," he said automatically, then caught himself. "Thank you. I'm sorry, Don't worry about it," Rosa said. "We all need our home language sometimes, especially when we're hurting." She started to walk away, then paused. "My daughter Maya is in the back, doing homework. She loves languages, speaks 3 of them already, and she's only 8. Kids these days, they pick up everything so fast." Klaus nodded politely, but his attention had already drifted back to his phone. The lead story on Der Spiegel's website featured a photograph of him from earlier in the day, looking confident and wealthy at a shareholders' meeting. The headline read, "The Face of Corporate Greed: How Klaus Hoffmann Built His Fortune on Workers' Suffering." The coffee was good, strong and bitter, like his grandmother used to make. Klaus found himself thinking about her now, about the woman who had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12. Oma Greta, who had worked as a seamstress to put him through university, who had always told him that success meant nothing if it came at the expense of others' suffering. "What would you think of me now, Oma?" he whispered to himself in German. "Sie würde denken, dass Sie vergessen haben, wer Sie wirklich sind." Klaus nearly dropped his coffee mug. The voice was small, high-pitched, and had spoken perfect German with a slight Bavarian accent, just like his grandmother's. He looked up to see a little girl standing beside his table, maybe 8 years old, with dark hair in braids and intelligent brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm sorry," Klaus said in English, his voice hoarse. "Did you just—" "I said she would think you forgot who you really are," the girl repeated, now in English but with the same serious expression. "You were talking to your Oma, right?" "Your grandmother." Klaus stared at her. How do you know German? And how did you know I was talking about my grandmother? I learned languages from books, the girl said matter-of-factly. And you got really sad when you said Oma, so I figured it out. I'm Maya, by the way. Rosa's my mama. She slid into the booth across from him without invitation, pulling a worn notebook from her backpack. Want to know something cool? In German, you have a word for everything. Like Fernweh. That's when you want to travel to places you've never been. And verschlimmbessern. That's when you try to make something better, but accidentally make it worse. Klaus found himself leaning forward despite his emotional exhaustion. You learned those from books? From books and videos and sometimes talking to people online. Mama works here until really late, so I stay in the back and study. I know Spanish because of Mama, English because we live here, and German because... She paused, looking suddenly shy. Because German stories are really good. They're sad sometimes, but they're honest about being sad. Honest about being sad, Klaus repeated. That's very wise. Maya opened her notebook, revealing pages of careful handwriting in multiple languages. Want to hear a German poem I memorized? It's by Rainer Maria Rilke. It's about how sometimes you have to go through dark places to find the light again. Klaus nodded, unable to speak. Maya cleared her throat and began to recite in perfect German. Vielleicht sind alle Drachen in unserem Leben Prinzessinnen, die nur darauf warten, uns einmal schön und mutig zu sehen. Vielleicht ist alles Schreckliche im Grunde das Hilflose, das von uns Hilfe will. Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses, who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest essence, something helpless that wants our love. Klaus felt tears welling up in his eyes. Where did you learn that? From a book about German philosophy, Maya said. I didn't understand all of it, but that part made sense. Sometimes the scariest things are just asking for help, you know. Maya, Rosa's voice called from behind the counter. Estás molestando al señor? I'm not bothering him, Mama, Maya called back in English. We're just talking about dragons and princesses. Rosa approached the table looking apologetic. I'm sorry, she's supposed to be doing homework. Maya, Vanika. It's fine, Klaus said quickly. She's actually helping me quite a bit. Rosa looked between her daughter and this strange, wealthy-looking man who had stumbled into her diner. There was something in his eyes, a pain she recognized. She'd seen it in the mirror plenty of times over the years. You're having a bad day, she said simply. Klaus laughed, but there was no humor in it. That would be an understatement. Mama, Maya said. He was talking to his Oma in German. I think she died. Maya, Rosa warned gently. No, it's okay, Klaus said. She did die. A long time ago. I was just thinking about what she would say if she could see me now. What would she say? Rosa asked, sliding into the booth next to Maya. Klaus was quiet for a long moment. She would say I became exactly the kind of person she raised me not to be. She would say, I forgot that. Money can't buy back a person's dignity once you've taken it away. Maya studied his face with the intense seriousness that children sometimes possess. Are you the man from the news? The one with the factories? Rosa's eyes widened. Maya. It's okay, Klaus said again. Yes, I am. I'm Klaus Hoffmann. And yes, I'm the man whose companies have hurt a lot of people. Why? Maya asked simply. It was the question Klaus had been avoiding all day, the one his lawyers and PR team and board members had been dancing around with their talk of market pressures and industry standards and competitive necessity. Because I stopped seeing them as people, Klaus said quietly. I saw them as numbers on a spreadsheet. I told myself that giving them jobs, even bad jobs, was better than no jobs. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true. Maya nodded gravely. In German, there's a word for that too. Realitätsverlust, when you lose touch with what's real. Klaus stared at her. Where did you learn that word? From a documentary about World War II. They used it to describe how people convinced themselves that terrible things were okay. Maya's expression grew more serious. But there's another word, Wiedergutmachung. It means making things right again. Making up for bad things you did. Rosa looked at her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. At 8 years old, Maya had already absorbed more complexity about the world than many adults ever would. The thing is, Maya continued, Wiedergutmachung isn't just saying sorry. It's changing everything so the bad thing can't happen again. My book said it takes a really long time and it's really hard, but it's the only way to get your soul back. Klaus felt something crack open in his chest. This child, this 8-year-old girl sitting in a diner at 9 o'clock at night because her mother had to work late, was teaching him about moral philosophy in his native language. How do you know so much? He asked. Maya shrugged. I read a lot while Mama works, and I ask questions about everything. Mama says curiosity is the best teacher. Your daughter is remarkable, Klaus said to Rosa. Rosa smiled, but there was worry in her eyes. Too remarkable sometimes. She understands things that kids shouldn't have to understand. Like what? Klaus asked gently. Rosa hesitated, glancing at Maya. Like why we might have to move soon. Like why Mama has to work 2 jobs. But we still don't have enough money sometimes. Klaus felt a familiar tightness in his chest. But this time it wasn't panic. You're facing financial difficulties? The diner is struggling, Rosa said quietly. The owner wants to sell to developers. They're going to tear it down and build condos. And my other job, well, there have been some changes. What's your other job? Rosa looked embarrassed. I clean offices downtown. At night, after the diner closes. Maya stays here and does homework until I'm done. Klaus did quick math in his head. If Rosa worked at the diner until closing, probably around 10 p.m., and then cleaned offices until morning, when did she sleep? When did she spend time with Maya? Mama's really tired all the time, Maya said matter-of-factly. But she says we're lucky because at least we have work. Some people don't. Maya, Rosa said softly. It's true, Mama. And you said I should always tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Klaus looked at this woman and her daughter, Rosa, who was working herself to exhaustion to provide for her child, and Maya, who was teaching herself multiple languages and philosophy while sitting in the back of a diner because she had nowhere else to go. The contrast with his own life was staggering. Rosa, Klaus said carefully, what's happening with your cleaning job? Rosa's face flushed. The company is making changes. They're hiring younger people, people who work faster. They're firing all the old people and all the people who don't speak perfect English, Maya said bluntly. They told Mama she's too slow and her accent is unprofessional. Maya. It's discrimination, Maya continued, unperturbed. I looked it up. It's illegal, but Mama says we can't afford a lawyer, and we need the job too much to complain. Klaus felt anger rising in his chest, but it wasn't the cold, calculating anger he was used to in business dealings. This was something warmer and more protective. How old are you, Rosa, if you don't mind me asking? 43, she said quietly. And how long have you been cleaning for this company? 7 years. Never missed a day, never had a complaint. Klaus pulled out his phone and made a note. What's the company's name? Rosa looked alarmed. Please, I can't afford to lose this job. Even if they're treating me badly, I need it. You're not going to lose anything, Klaus said firmly. I promise you that. Maya tilted her head. Are you going to help us? because you seem like you have a lot of money, but also like you're really sad about how you got it. Klaus laughed despite himself. You're very direct. Mama says directness saves time, and time is the only thing we don't have enough of. Klaus looked at Rosa, who was watching him with a mixture of hope and wariness. He thought about his grandmother, about the values she had tried to instill in him. He thought about the Vietnamese girl whose suicide note had started his downward spiral. He thought about the choice that lay in front of him. He could use what remained of his wealth and influence to protect himself, to minimize his losses, and salvage what he could of his reputation. Or he could do something else entirely. Rosa, he said, what would you do if you didn't have to worry about money? If you could choose any life for yourself and Maya, what would it look like? Rosa blinked in surprise. I don't think about things like that. But if you could? She was quiet for a long moment, looking at her daughter. I would want Maya to go to a good school. One where they understand how smart she is and help her learn everything she wants to learn. And I would want to have a job where I could use my brain, not just my hands. I was a teacher back in El Salvador. I loved teaching. What did you teach? Elementary school. All subjects, but especially reading. I loved helping kids discover that they could understand complicated ideas if someone explained them the right way. Klaus nodded slowly. Maya, what would you want? Maya considered seriously. I want to keep learning languages. And I want Mama to not be so tired all the time. And I want to help people understand each other better, because I think a lot of problems happen because people can't talk to each other. Klaus felt something shift inside him, like tumblers falling into place in a lock. I have an idea, he said, but first, I need to ask you both something important. If I told you that I wanted to help you, really help you, would you trust me? Rosa's eyes narrowed slightly. Why would you want to help us? You don't even know us. Because, Klaus said, looking at Maya, someone just reminded me that the scariest things are sometimes just asking for help. And I think maybe I'm one of those scary things. Maya grinned. Dragons and princesses. Dragons and princesses, Klaus agreed. Klaus spent the night in a hotel room overlooking the bay, but he didn't sleep. Instead, he sat at the desk with his laptop open, making lists and calculations and phone calls. By morning, he had the skeleton of a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. He returned to Rosita's kitchen just as Rosa was opening for the breakfast shift. She looked surprised to see him, but not displeased. You came back, she said. I told you I had an idea. I spent all night working on it. Klaus slid into the same booth he'd occupied the night before. Is Maya here? She's getting ready for school in the back. Maya! El Señor is here. Maya appeared a moment later, wearing a school uniform that had seen better days, but was clean and carefully pressed. Her backpack was covered in patches from different countries' flags. Did you figure out your Wiedergutmachung? She asked Klaus seriously. I think so, but I need your help to make it work. Maya sat down across from him, pulling out a notebook. Okay, what do you need? Klaus looked at Rosa, who was hovering nearby with a coffee pot. Could you sit down for a minute? This involves both of you. Rosa poured Klaus a cup of coffee and sat down next to Maya. What kind of help are you talking about? I want to buy this diner, Klaus said without preamble. Both Rosa and Maya stared at him. But not to tear it down, Klaus continued quickly, to turn it into something bigger. A community center, a place where people like Maya can come to learn, where people like you can teach, where families can get help with legal problems and job training and language classes. That sounds expensive, Rosa said cautiously. Very expensive, Klaus agreed. but I have a lot of money and I need to start using it better. The question is, would you run it? Rosa blinked. Run what? The whole thing. You would be the director. Maya said you were a teacher. This would be a chance to teach again, but to teach adults and children, to help people navigate the systems that are designed to keep them down. I don't understand, Rosa said slowly. Klaus leaned forward. Rosa, you've been fighting discrimination and poverty and a system that doesn't value your intelligence or your experience. You know exactly what people in this community need because you've needed it yourself. Who better to run a program designed to help them? Maya was scribbling notes in her notebook. What about the cleaning company that's being mean to Mama? Klaus smiled grimly. That's the other part of the plan. Maya, how would you like to help me write some very important letters in German? What kind of letters? Letters to my business partners in Germany. Letters explaining that any company that wants to work with what's left of Hoffman Tech needs to meet very specific standards about how they treat their employees, including American companies that hire cleaning services. Maya's eyes lit up. You're going to make them be nice to their workers? I'm going to make it too expensive for them not to be nice to their workers, Klaus corrected. And I'm going to fund investigations into companies that discriminate against older workers or immigrants. Rosa was looking between them with growing amazement. This is really what you want to do? Rosa, yesterday I was a billionaire who had built his fortune on other people's suffering. Today I'm a billionaire who has a chance to do something different. The money is already there. The question is whether I use it to protect myself or to protect people like you. But why us? Rosa asked. Why not some big charity or foundation? Klaus thought about how to explain this. Big charities and foundations are run by people like me. People who have never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. People who have never been discriminated against because of their accent or their age. They mean well, but they don't understand what the problems actually are. And we do, Maya said. And you do. Klaus pulled out a folder he'd prepared. I spent the night researching the legal requirements for this kind of nonprofit. I can provide the initial funding and ongoing support, but it needs to be run by people from the community it's serving. Rosa opened the folder and stared at the papers inside. This is a real job offer. With a real salary, enough that you can quit both of your current jobs and focus on this full-time. Enough that Maya can go to whatever school will challenge her appropriately. Maya was bouncing slightly in her seat. Mama, you could teach again. I don't know if I remember how, Rosa said quietly. You've been teaching Maya her whole life, Klaus pointed out. You taught her Spanish and English. You taught her to ask questions. You taught her that curiosity is the best teacher. Those are exactly the skills this job would require. Rosa was quiet for a long moment, staring at the papers. What's the catch? No catch. Well, one catch. I need Maya's help with the German correspondence, and I need both of you to help me understand what services this community actually needs. I can provide money and connections, but I can't provide knowledge I don't have. You want us to teach you, Maya said. I want you to teach me, Klaus confirmed, about how the world looks from your perspective. About what kinds of help actually help versus the kinds that just make wealthy people feel better about themselves. Rosa looked up from the papers. This salary, this is more than I make in both jobs combined. Good. You're worth more than you've been getting paid. Maya leaned across the table. Klaus, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why did you become a person who hurt other people? Were you always like that? Klaus considered the question seriously. No, I wasn't always like that. When I was young, I wanted to help people. I studied engineering because I thought technology could solve problems and make life better. But somewhere along the way, I started caring more about winning than about helping. I started seeing other people as competition instead of as people. What changed? Yesterday, I remembered that I'm going to die someday, and when I do, the only thing that will matter is whether I made the world better or worse, and right now the honest answer is worse. Maya nodded solemnly. So now you want to make it better? Now I want to try to make it better, but I can't do it alone, and I can't do it from the top down. I need partners who understand things I don't understand. Rosa closed the folder. I need to think about this. Of course. Take all the time you need. Can I ask you something? Rosa said. What happens if this doesn't work? What happens if I'm not good at running something like this? Klaus met her eyes. Rosa, you raised a daughter who speaks 3 languages and can discuss German philosophy while still maintaining enough childhood innocence to believe that dragons might be princesses in disguise. You've survived discrimination and poverty while maintaining your dignity and your kindness. You've worked 2 jobs for years without compromising your values or your commitment to your child. If you can't run this program successfully, then it can't be run successfully. Maya grinned. Mama, he thinks you're awesome. Rosa blushed. Maya. It's true, Klaus said. I've spent my career working with people who have Harvard MBAs and decades of corporate experience, and most of them don't have half the practical wisdom you've demonstrated in the past 18 hours. Rosa was quiet again, then said, Can I see the space? Can I understand what you're envisioning? Absolutely. The current owner is motivated to sell quickly. The developers have been pressuring him. If we move fast, we can prevent the demolition and start renovations immediately. Maya pulled out a pencil and started sketching in her notebook. What if we had different rooms for different languages? And what if we had a kitchen where people could teach each other how to cook food from their countries? That's brilliant, Klaus said. Food is one of the best ways for people to share their cultures. And what if we had legal help? Rosa added, getting drawn into the vision despite herself. So many people in this community are afraid to ask for help because they don't understand their rights. We can partner with legal aid organizations and with the local community college for job training programs. Maya was scribbling furiously. And what if we had story time in different languages? So kids can hear stories from all over the world. Klaus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine excitement about a project that had nothing to do with profit margins or market dominance. Maya, would you like to be our first junior consultant? What does a junior consultant do? They ask good questions and help adults remember what's actually important. Maya considered this seriously. Okay, but I still have to go to school and do my homework. Obviously, Klaus agreed. Your education comes first. This would just be a few hours a week, helping us plan programs and making sure we don't forget to think about what kids need too. Rosa stood up abruptly. I need to start the breakfast prep. Can we talk about this more tonight? Of course. What time do you get off your cleaning job? Rosa's face fell. I have to go there tonight and ask them not to fire me. I can't quit until I know for sure this other thing is real. Klaus pulled out his phone. What's the name of the cleaning company again? Pristine Professional Services. But please, I can't afford any trouble. Klaus was already dialing. This is Klaus Hoffman. I need to speak to your general manager immediately. Rosa and Maya watched as Klaus switched into what was clearly his business voice, confident, authoritative, and absolutely unyielding. Yes, I'll hold. Klaus covered the phone with his hand. Rosa, you are not going to work for them tonight or any other night. By the time I'm done with this phone call, they're going to be very motivated to treat their employees better. Hello? This is Klaus Hoffman of Hoffman Tech. I understand. You provide cleaning services for several of the buildings my company leases downtown. Klaus's voice was pleasant but had an undercurrent of steel. I'm calling because I've learned that your company has some concerning employment practices, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to address them before I decide whether to recommend that my partners find alternative service providers. Klaus listened for a moment, then continued. Specifically, I'm told that you've been terminating older employees and employees with accents under the pretense of performance issues. Is that accurate? More listening. Klaus's expression grew colder. I see. Well, let me be very clear about something. My company and our partners control cleaning contracts worth approximately $40 million annually in this city. If I discover that any of our service providers are engaging in discriminatory practices, we will terminate those relationships immediately and ensure that information about those practices becomes public record. Rosa grabbed Maya's hand, hardly daring to breathe. Furthermore, any employees who have been wrongfully terminated will receive full back pay and benefits, or we will pursue legal action on their behalf. Do I make myself clear? Klaus paused. Excellent. I'll expect to see documentation of policy changes within 48 hours. Good day. Klaus hung up and looked at Rosa, who was staring at him with her mouth open. You still have your job, he said simply, but you don't have to keep it. Maya started clapping. That was awesome. You were like a dragon protecting a princess. Klaus laughed. I think that might be the first time anyone's called my business tactics protective rather than predatory. Rosa sat back down heavily. I can't believe you just did that. Rosa, I spent 30 years using my influence to protect my profits. It's about time I used it to protect people instead. Maya was still scribbling in her notebook. Klaus, when we build our community center, can we have a sign that says, Dragons and Princesses Welcome in lots of different languages? Maya, Rosa said, we haven't decided anything yet. But Klaus was already nodding. I think that's perfect. In fact, I think that should be our motto. Rosa looked at her daughter's excited face and Klaus's determined expression. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different kind of life. One where her intelligence was valued, where Maya's gifts were nurtured, where they weren't constantly scrambling just to survive. Okay, she said quietly. Let's try. Maya whooped and threw her arms around her mother. Mama, we're going to help dragons become princesses. And princesses become dragons, Klaus added. I think that's equally important. 3 months later, Klaus stood in the gutted space that had once been Rosita's kitchen, watching Rosa direct a team of contractors with the confidence of someone born to lead. The transformation was remarkable, not just of the space, but of Rosa herself. The legal aid office needs to be near the front, Rosa was saying to the lead contractor, but with enough privacy for confidential conversations. And the children's area needs sight lines to the adult classroom spaces so parents can keep an eye on their kids during classes. Maya was sitting at a folding table in the corner, surrounded by poster boards and markers, working on what she called the Welcome Signs Project. She'd recruited volunteers to help her create greeting signs in 15 different languages, each one decorated with drawings of dragons and princesses that managed to be both whimsical and dignified. Klaus, Maya called out when she saw him. Come see what Mrs. Chen taught me how to write. Klaus walked over to admire her latest creation, a beautifully calligraphed sign in Mandarin Chinese that read, Dragons and Princesses Welcome Here. Mrs. Chen used to be a calligraphy teacher in Beijing, Maya explained. Now she works at the laundromat, but she's going to teach art classes here on weekends. And Mr. Okafor is going to teach computer skills. He was an IT manager in Nigeria before he came here. Klaus had learned that this was one of the most remarkable things about their community center project. As word spread about what they were building, volunteers had emerged from everywhere. People like Mrs. Chen and Mr. Okafor, whose professional skills had been dismissed or devalued in the American job market, were eager for opportunities to share their expertise in an environment that respected their knowledge. "How many volunteers do we have now?" Klaus asked. 47, Maya announced proudly. "And Mama says we might have to start a waiting list for people who want to take classes." Rosa appeared at Klaus's elbow, holding a clipboard and looking slightly frazzled but happy. "The demand is incredible. We're getting calls from people as far away as Oakland who want to participate in our programs." "That's wonderful," Klaus said. "Are we going to have enough space?" "For Phase 1, yes. But I've been thinking." Rosa hesitated. "What is it?" "What if we opened a second location?" "There's a community center in the Mission District that's about to close due to funding cuts. The director called me yesterday asking if we'd be interested in taking it over." Klaus raised an eyebrow. "That's a big expansion. Do you feel ready for it?" 6 months ago, I would have said no," Rosa admitted. "But this work, it's like I've found the part of myself I lost when I had to stop teaching. I feel ready for anything." Maya looked up from her art project. "Plus, if we have 2 locations, we can have twice as many dragons and princesses." Klaus laughed. "I think that settles it. Let's look at the mission site next week." The truth was, Klaus had never been happier to spend money. In the 3 months since that night at the diner, he had liquidated most of his stock holdings and restructured Hoffman Tech as a worker-owned cooperative. The transition had been messy and expensive, but it had also been liberating. For the first time in decades, Klaus woke up each morning excited about his work, rather than burdened by it. "Klaus," Rosa said, lowering her voice slightly, "I want to talk to you about something." "What's on your mind?" "It's about Maya. Her school counselor called yesterday. They want to test her for the gifted program, but they're also recommending that she skip a grade, maybe 2 grades. Klaus looked over at Maya, who was now teaching one of the teenage volunteers how to write "welcome" in German. "What do you think?" "I think she's academically ready, but I worry about the social aspects. She's already spending most of her time with adults. I don't want her to lose touch with being a kid." "What does Maya think?" "She says she wants to keep learning languages and helping people, but she also wants to stay 8 for a while longer. She asked if there was a way to take some advanced classes, but still get to play with kids her own age." Klaus nodded thoughtfully. "What if we created our own solution? What if Maya became our first scholarship student at the international school downtown? They have programs for gifted children that allow them to advance academically while staying with their age group socially. And they emphasize language learning and cultural exchange." Rosa's eyes widened. "Klaus, that school costs more than I used to make in a year." "Rosa, you're running a program that's going to help thousands of people. Your daughter is already proving herself to be an extraordinary cultural ambassador. Consider it an investment in our future leadership." Maya appeared at Klaus's side, apparently having overheard the conversation. "What's the international school?" "It's a school where kids from all over the world learn together," Klaus explained. "They study regular subjects, but they also learn about different cultures and languages. And they have a program where gifted students can take advanced classes in subjects they're ready for, while still doing age-appropriate social activities." Maya's eyes lit up. "Could I still help here after school?" "Absolutely," Rosa said. "In fact, I was hoping you'd design our children's programming. We need someone who understands what kids actually want to learn, not just what adults think they should learn." "Can I teach other kids about dragons and princesses?" Klaus grinned. "I think that should be our first-class offering." The sound of hammering echoed through the space as workers installed new flooring in what would become the main classroom. Klaus had hired the same construction company that was supposed to demolish the building, but now they were transforming it instead. Many of the workers had expressed interest in the English classes and job training programs they were planning to offer. Mr. Hoffman? One of the workers, a young Latino man named Carlos, approached them. I wanted to thank you for what you're doing here. My wife is really excited about the computer classes. Thank you, Carlos. But you should thank Rosa. She's the one making this all happen. Carlos nodded to Rosa. My wife says you're going to help her study for her nursing degree. If that's what she wants to do, Rosa replied. We're going to have test preparation classes and academic support for people pursuing higher education. She's been a nurse in Guatemala for 10 years, but here they won't recognize her credentials. She's been working in housekeeping while she tries to figure out how to get certified here. Klaus felt the familiar anger rise in his chest, not at Carlos or his wife, but at a system that wasted so much human potential. We're going to work with the local nursing schools to create a pathway program for internationally trained healthcare workers. Your wife shouldn't have to start over from scratch. Carlos's face lit up. Really? That would change everything for our family. After Carlos returned to work, Rosa turned to Klaus. How did you know about pathway programs for international professionals? I didn't until last week. I've been spending a lot of time researching immigration policy and professional credentialing. It's amazing how many barriers exist that serve no purpose except to protect established interests. Maya looked up from her art project again. Klaus, are you going to fix all the unfair things? Klaus knelt down to Maya's level. I'm going to try to fix some of them. But the most important thing I'm learning is that I can't fix them by myself. I need partners like your mama, and teachers like Mrs. Chen, and advocates like you. What's an advocate? Someone who speaks up for people who need help. Someone who uses their voice to make things more fair. Maya considered this seriously. I think I want to be an advocate when I grow up, but also a translator, so I can help people understand each other. I think those two jobs go together perfectly, Rosa said, ruffling her daughter's hair. Klaus's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled. Good news. The legal aid partnership is official. We'll have 2 lawyers on staff part-time starting next month. That's wonderful, Rosa said. Mrs. Rodriguez has been asking every day when we'll be able to help her with her housing situation. Klaus had learned that Mrs. Rodriguez was facing eviction because her landlord was claiming she had violated her lease by having overnight guests. But the guests were her own grandchildren, who she was caring for while their parents worked night shifts. It was technically legal for the landlord to evict her, but it was also cruel and unnecessary. Once we have legal staff, cases like Mrs. Rodriguez's will be much easier to handle, Klaus said. But I've been thinking about systemic solutions too. Such as partnering with developers who are committed to affordable housing instead of luxury condos. Such as advocating for tenant protection laws that prevent retaliatory evictions. Maya had stopped working on her signs and was listening intently. Klaus, you're starting to sound like a dragon who decided to protect princesses instead of hoarding treasure. Klaus laughed. That might be the most accurate description of my career change that anyone's given me. Rosa checked her watch. Maya, we need to start packing up. You have a doctor's appointment in an hour. Just a regular checkup, Maya explained to Klaus. But now we have good insurance, so Mama doesn't worry as much about taking me to the doctor. Klaus felt a wave of satisfaction. One of the first things he'd done after hiring Rosa was to ensure that she and Maya had comprehensive health coverage. It was a small thing in the context of his overall wealth, but it had made an enormous difference in their daily lives. As Maya packed up her art supplies, she turned to Klaus with a serious expression. Can I ask you something personal again? Always. Do you miss being really rich? Klaus considered the question. I'm still really rich, Maya. I just use the money differently now. But do you miss the fancy cars and big houses and people doing whatever you wanted them to do? You know what I miss most? Klaus said thoughtfully. I miss the feeling that I was building something important. For a long time, I thought making money was the same thing as building something important. Now I know they're completely different. What are we building here? Klaus looked around the construction site that would soon be a community center, at Rosa directing workers with quiet authority, at Maya's welcome signs in 15 languages, at the volunteers who showed up every day to contribute their skills and expertise. We're building a place where people can become who they're supposed to be, he said, where someone like your mama can use her intelligence and education to help other people, where someone like Mrs. Chen can teach art again, where someone like Carlos's wife can become a nurse again. Maya nodded gravely. We're building a place where dragons and princesses can figure out who they really are. Exactly. Rosa finished giving instructions to the contractors and walked over to them. Ready to go, Mija? As they prepared to leave, Klaus felt his phone buzzing with another call. He glanced at the caller ID and saw that it was his former assistant from Hoffman Tech. I should take this, he told Rosa and Maya. I'll see you both tomorrow. Klaus answered the phone as he walked outside. Guten Tag, Heinrich. Klaus, I have news about the Jakarta investigation. Klaus felt his stomach tighten. What kind of news? The Indonesian government is filing criminal charges against our former contractor and the families of the workers who died in the fire. They want to meet with you. Klaus stopped walking. They want to meet with me? They want to thank you. The compensation fund you established has allowed them to rebuild their lives, and the new safety standards you've implemented industry-wide. They've already prevented 2 other fires at different facilities. Klaus felt tears welling up in his eyes. For months he had been haunted by the knowledge that his business decisions had contributed to those deaths. The idea that some good might come from that tragedy felt almost too much to hope for. Heinrich, can you arrange the meeting? I want to fly to Jakarta next month. Already arranged. And Klaus. They want to bring their children to meet you. They want their children to see what it looks like when someone takes responsibility and tries to make things right. After he hung up, Klaus stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, watching the late afternoon sun reflect off the windows of the building that would soon house their community center. 6 months ago, he had been a man fleeing from the consequences of his choices. Now he was a man walking toward them, trying to build something worthy of the trust that people like Rosa and Maya had placed in him. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Don't forget that dragons have to practice being princesses every day. It doesn't happen automatically. See you tomorrow. Klaus smiled and texted back. Thank you for reminding me. See you tomorrow, my young teacher. As he walked toward his car, Klaus thought about his grandmother, about what she would think of the man he was becoming. For the first time in decades, he thought she might be proud. 6 months after the community center opened, Klaus arrived for the weekly staff meeting to find Rosa pacing in what had become their main conference room. Maya was at the children's table in the corner, working on homework but clearly listening to everything. What's wrong? Klaus asked immediately. We have a problem, Rosa said, holding up a thick stack of papers. Actually, we have a wonderful problem, but it's still a problem. Klaus sat down at the conference table, which was made from reclaimed wood and surrounded by mismatched chairs donated by community members. Tell me. We have a waiting list of 300 people for our programs, Rosa said, and we've received funding requests from organizations in 12 different cities who want to replicate what we're doing here. Maya looked up from her homework. Why is that a problem? Because we can't serve 300 more people in our current space, Rosa explained, and we don't have the infrastructure to help 12 other cities start similar programs. Klaus leaned back in his chair thinking. In the past 6 months, their little community center had become something neither of them had anticipated. What had started as a neighborhood resource had evolved into a model that people across the country were studying and trying to replicate. "Let me ask you something," Klaus said. "If we could solve the infrastructure problem, would you want to expand?" Rosa sat down across from him. "Klaus, 6 months ago I was cleaning offices at night and barely scraping by. Now I'm running a program that's changing people's lives every single day. Sometimes I feel like I'm dreaming." "That's not an answer to my question." Rosa smiled. "Yes, I would want to expand. But only if we can do it right. Only if we can maintain the quality of what we're offering and the relationships we're building." Maya raised her hand like she was in school. "Can I make a suggestion?" "Always," Klaus said. "What if we trained other people to start their own centers? Like, what if Mama and Klaus went to other cities and taught them how to do what we do here?" Klaus looked at Rosa. "That's actually brilliant. Instead of trying to manage multiple locations directly, we could create a franchise model, but for non-profits." "A training institute," Rosa said slowly, catching on to the idea. "We could develop curricula and best practices, then train community leaders in other cities to implement them. And we could have visits between the different centers," Maya added excitedly. "So kids from different places could teach each other languages and share their cultures." Klaus felt the familiar excitement that had become his new normal. "Maya, you just described something that could change how community development works nationwide." Rosa was scribbling notes on a piece of paper. "We'd need to be careful about maintaining quality control, and we'd need to ensure that each center reflects its own community's needs, not just copying what we do here." "What if that's part of the training?" Klaus suggested. "What if the first step in starting a new center is conducting a comprehensive community needs assessment?" Maya had abandoned her homework entirely and was now drawing diagrams on a separate piece of paper. "And what if each center had to have kids involved in the planning? Because adults sometimes forget to think about what kids actually need." Klaus laughed. "I think Maya should be our chief youth consultant for the expansion." "What does a chief youth consultant do?" Maya asked seriously. "They make sure adults don't make stupid decisions," Rosa said with a grin. "I can do that," Maya said confidently. Klaus's phone rang, interrupting their planning session. He glanced at the caller ID and saw that it was Dr. Sarah Kim, a researcher from UC Berkeley who had been studying their program. "Dr. Kim," Klaus answered. "How can I help you?" "Mr. Hoffman, I have some results from our preliminary study that I think you'll want to hear." Klaus put the phone on speaker, so Rosa and Maya could listen. "Go ahead." "We've been tracking outcomes for the first cohort of participants in your programs, and the results are remarkable. Participants in your job training programs have an employment rate of 93% after 6 months. Participants in your English classes show language acquisition rates that are nearly double the national average. And perhaps most importantly, we're seeing significant improvements in mental health and social connectivity measures." Rosa's eyes widened. 93% employment? "And that's not just any employment, Doctor." Kim continued. "These are jobs with livable wages and advancement opportunities. The legal aid component has been particularly effective. You've helped resolve over 200 cases in 6 months, with a success rate of 87%. Maya pumped her fist in the air. "We're helping dragons become princesses." Dr. Kim's voice sounded confused. "I'm sorry, dragons and princesses?" Klaus grinned. "That's our unofficial motto." "It's a long story." "Well, whatever you're doing, it's working. In fact, it's working so well that I've been asked to present your model at the National Community Development Conference next month. Would you be willing to participate in a panel discussion?" Klaus looked at Rosa, who nodded enthusiastically. "We'd be honored." After they hung up, the three of them sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what they'd accomplished. "Rosa," Klaus said quietly, "do you understand what this means?" It means we're not just helping individual people, Rosa said slowly. It means we're proving that a different model works. That investing in communities and treating people with dignity actually produces better outcomes than traditional approaches. Maya looked between them. Are we going to be famous? Klaus laughed. I don't know about famous, but we're definitely going to be busy. Over the next hour, they outlined a plan for expansion that was ambitious but manageable. They would start by training teams in 5 cities, providing them with comprehensive toolkits and ongoing support. Each new center would be required to adapt the model to their specific community needs while maintaining core principles of dignity, cultural respect, and community leadership. We'll need to hire more staff, Rosa said, making notes. And we'll need a much bigger budget. The budget isn't a problem, Klaus said. I've been liquidating more assets anyway. But you're right about staff. We need people who understand both the practical and philosophical aspects of what we're doing. Maya looked up from her drawing. What about Mrs. Chen and Mr. Okafor? They're really good at teaching people, and they understand about having your skills not be recognized. Klaus nodded thoughtfully. That's perfect. We need trainers who have lived experience with the problems we're trying to solve. And what about people from other cities who want to learn? Rosa asked. Should we bring them here first, or should we go there? Both, Klaus said. We could have intensive training residencies here, and also send teams out to do on-site consulting. Maya held up her drawing, which showed stick figures of different colors holding hands around buildings labeled Dragon Princess Centers in various cities. This is what it could look like. Klaus studied the drawing seriously. Maya, can I ask you to add something to the picture? What? Can you draw lines connecting all the centers? Because I think one of the most important things will be ongoing communication and support between communities. Maya nodded and started adding connecting lines to her drawing, like a network. Exactly like a network, Rosa said. A network of communities supporting each other. Klaus felt his phone buzzing with a text message. He glanced at it and saw that it was from Carlos, the construction worker whose wife had been interested in their nursing program. The text read, Mr. Hoffman, I wanted to let you know that Maria passed her nursing exam today. She starts work at UCSF next month. Thank you for giving her the chance to be who she was meant to be. Klaus showed the text to Rosa and Maya, feeling the familiar mixture of pride and humility that had become his new normal. You know what the best part of this is? Rosa said after reading the message. What? Carlos's family is going to be okay now. But more than that, Maria is going to help other people as a nurse. One investment in one person creates this ripple effect that touches dozens of other lives. Maya looked up from her drawing. That's why we have to expand, isn't it? So the ripples can get bigger and reach more people. Klaus nodded. But we have to be careful that in making the ripples bigger, we don't lose the things that make them powerful in the first place. What things? Maya asked. The personal relationships, Rosa said. The fact that everyone who comes here is treated as an individual with unique talents and needs, not just as a case number or a statistic. The dragons and princesses thing, Maya added seriously. The part where we remember that everyone has something valuable to offer, even if it's hidden. Klaus looked around their conference room, with its mismatched furniture and Maya's multilingual welcome signs on the walls. 6 months ago, he had been a man running from the consequences of his choices. Now he was a man helping other people create new choices for themselves. All right, he said, standing up. Let's start planning our expansion. But first, Maya, how's your homework coming along? Maya grinned and held up a math worksheet covered in correct answers. Finished. I had time to do it while you and Mama were talking, because I'm getting really good at multitasking. Rosa laughed, just like her mama. As Klaus prepared to leave for the day, Maya called out to him. Klaus, Don't forget that tomorrow is story time in German. Mrs. Muller is going to teach us about fairy tales where the dragons are actually the good guys." "I wouldn't miss it," Klaus replied. "It sounds like the perfect lesson for an old dragon like me." Maya giggled. "You're not old. You're just experienced." As Klaus drove home that evening, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this point. A year ago, he had measured his success by the size of his bank account and the fear he inspired in his competitors. Now he measured it by text messages from grateful families, by employment statistics that represented real people building better lives, by the sight of his 8-year-old mentor teaching other children that dragons and princesses could coexist in the same person. His grandmother would definitely be proud. 1 year later, Klaus stood at the podium of the National Community Development Conference, looking out at an audience of 500 community leaders, activists, and philanthropists. To his left sat Rosa, who had become a sought-after speaker on community-led development models. To his right sat Maya, now 9 years old, and officially the youngest presenter in the conference's history. "When I was building my fortune," Klaus began, "I thought success meant having power over other people. I thought it meant being able to control outcomes and minimize risks. I was wrong about almost everything." He paused, looking at Rosa and Maya, who both nodded encouragingly. "True success, I've learned, means helping other people discover their own power. It means creating conditions where people can become who they're meant to be, rather than who circumstances have forced them to be." In the audience, Klaus could see representatives from the 12 cities where Dragon Princess community centers had opened in the past year. Each center reflected its local community's needs and culture, while maintaining the core principles they had developed in San Francisco. "My colleague Rosa will tell you about the practical aspects of our model," Klaus continued, "about community-led needs assessments and culturally responsive programming and sustainable funding structures. But first, I want to share what I've learned from our chief youth consultant, Maya, about the philosophy that underlies everything we do." Maya stepped up to the microphone, which had been adjusted to her height. She was wearing a professional-looking dress, but had insisted on keeping her dragon and princess pins on the lapel. "Hi, everyone," Maya said confidently. "A year and a half ago, I met a really sad dragon in my mama's diner. He was sad because he had forgotten that being powerful meant helping people, not hurting them." Klaus felt his throat tighten with emotion as Maya continued. "See, I learned from reading stories that dragons aren't bad, and princesses aren't helpless. Dragons are just really powerful, and princesses are really smart and brave. The problem happens when dragons forget that they're supposed to protect people, and when princesses forget that they don't need anyone to rescue them." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word from this 9-year-old philosopher. In our community centers, we help people remember what they really are. Some people are dragons who forgot how to be kind. Some people are princesses who forgot how to be powerful. And some people are both at the same time, which is actually the best thing to be. Maya looked directly at Klaus. "Klaus used to be a dragon who hoarded treasure. Now he's a dragon who shares treasure so other people can build their own castles. And my mama used to be a princess who had to work really hard just to survive. Now she's a princess who teaches other people how to build their own kingdoms." Klaus stepped back up to the microphone. "Maya has just explained in 2 minutes what it took me 30 years and a complete life crisis to understand. The question isn't whether you're a dragon or a princess. The question is whether you're using your power to help people or to hurt them." Rosa joined them at the podium. From a practical standpoint, what this means is that effective community development has to start with recognizing the power and wisdom that already exists in every community. Our role isn't to fix people or save people. Our role is to create space for people to fix and save themselves. After their presentation, Klaus found himself surrounded by conference attendees asking questions and requesting consultations. But the conversation that meant the most to him came from a young woman who approached him during the coffee break. "Mr. Hoffman," she said nervously, "my name is Lynn Pham. I'm a graduate student studying labor relations." Klaus felt his heart stop. "Pham. Are you related to Lynn Nguyen, the young woman who died in the Jakarta fire?" The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "She was my cousin. I wanted to thank you for what you did after what happened to her. The compensation fund helped our family survive. But more than that, the changes you made to safety standards. They've saved other people's lives." Klaus felt tears welling up in his own eyes. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Your cousin's death was a tragedy that should never have happened." "I know," Lynn said quietly. "But what you did afterward, it meant that her death wasn't meaningless. It meant that something good came from something terrible." She handed him a small wrapped package. "This was hers." "I thought you should have it." Klaus opened the package to find a small notebook filled with carefully written German vocabulary words and phrases. On the first page, in neat handwriting, was written, "Someday I will speak German and travel to Europe and see snow." Klaus stared at the notebook, overwhelmed by the weight of this young woman's dreams that would never be fulfilled, but also by the realization that her death had set in motion a chain of events that had ultimately led to thousands of other people getting chances to pursue their own dreams. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I will treasure this." After the conference, Klaus, Rosa, and Maya flew back to San Francisco together. As their plane descended over the bay, Maya pressed her face to the window and pointed excitedly. "Look! You can see our center from here." Klaus looked down at the city where his transformation had begun. Somewhere down there, Mrs. Chen was teaching calligraphy to a group of teenagers. Carlos was leading a construction skills workshop. Rosa's assistant director, a former refugee from Somalia, was helping new immigrants navigate the healthcare system. "Klaus," Maya said, settling back into her seat, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think we're going to be able to help all the dragons and princesses in the world?" Klaus considered the question seriously. "No, Maya. I don't think we can help everyone, but I think we can help enough people that they'll go out and help other people, who will help still other people. And maybe that's how the world changes, not all at once, but one person at a time." Maya nodded gravely. "Like ripples in a pond." "Exactly like ripples in a pond." Rosa, who had been dozing during the flight, opened her eyes and smiled at them. "Are you two planning to solve all the world's problems during this flight?" "Just the ones we can reach," Maya said seriously. Klaus laughed. "That seems like enough for now." As their plane touched down in San Francisco, Klaus thought about the notebook in his carry-on bag, about Lynn Nguyen's dreams of speaking German and seeing snow. Those specific dreams would never be fulfilled, but the changes that her death had catalyzed were helping thousands of other people pursue their own dreams in dozens of cities. It wasn't justice, exactly. It wasn't enough to balance the scales. But it was something. It was a start. And for a reformed dragon who was still learning how to be a princess, it was enough. Maya grabbed his hand as they prepared to deplane. "Come on, Klaus. Let's go home and help some more people remember who they really are." Klaus squeezed her small hand in his larger one. "Lead the way, my teacher." As they walked through the airport together, a billionaire philanthropist, a community leader, and a 9-year-old philosopher, Klaus reflected on the strange turns that life could take. A year and a half ago, he had been a man fleeing from the consequences of his choices. Now he was a man walking toward new choices every day, guided by the wisdom of a child who understood that dragons and princesses could coexist in the same heart. His grandmother would definitely be proud.